Hi guys, in this video we're going to look into the baking process in Substance Painter. So this is following on from my last video. I've got my low and my high here. Everything's prepared as we talked about last time. So I'm going to take the low mesh here. I'm going to select everything. I am going to export the selection. I can export as an FBX or an OBJ. It doesn't particularly matter. If one doesn't work, try the other one. So I'm going to export it here. I'm going to call it cube mesh underscore low, so I know which one that is. So I'm just going to put it on my desktop for now, but you might want to put it somewhere more tidy. And then I'm going to do the same for the high here. File, export the selection, and call it the same thing, but give it underscore high. Super. So now we can hop over to Substance Painter. And I am going to make a new project, and I am going to select my low poly mesh. So my low poly is my mesh, my high poly is just a texturing process, so I've added all that extra detail on to bake down. It's not my actual mesh, this is my actual mesh here, so I can open this one. Document resolution 1024, that's probably going to be okay for this one here, and I'm using PBR Metal Rough, fairly standard things up here. Okay, so let's bring that in here. There we go. So now we can see my mesh is in here. And then I'm going to look for my texture set settings, which are here. This is my texture set settings. You'll need to find it on yours. If you don't have it, then we can find it under Window, and texture set settings are there. Then we can bake mesh maps. Okay, so here is our bake mesh maps. We're going to bake normals, but we're also going to bake all of this stuff. So curvature, position, and thickness, those are going to give us information, give Substance Painter information about our mesh, how thick it is, the position of where stuff is, so from top to bottom. Ambient occlusion, we're going to bake, so that's going to give us some soft shadowing around this point here, and also around the edge of those rivets. We don't need an ID map, and we'll leave everything else like it is. So let's click here to plug in our high poly mesh. Let's now plug that high poly in there. Let's have a little look down. So we've then got max frontal distance, max rear distance. This is how far it's going to search for, for different objects. So if it doesn't quite bake everything, we can increase that. We're going to leave it as default just for now. And then this is some really important parts here. So we're going to match by mesh name. So what this is going to do is it's going to bake the bottom bit on its own, then it's going to bake the top bit on its own. What we might get happen is the top might bake onto the bottom here, and I might get the imprint of this on this, and I don't want that. So this is why we named things when we were over in Maya. This is why we've got these names. So it's going to look at these suffixes here, and it's just going to bake them. So it's going to bake the two top cubes together, the two bottom cubes together. So we then just need to fill in exactly as it is. So I've got a capital H, I must use a capital H, otherwise Substance isn't going to recognize it. It's very case sensitive there. We can also do some anti-aliasing, but at this point I'm not going to do that. When I do my final bake, I would definitely use anti-aliasing, but it's going to increase the time it takes to bake, and I just want to make sure everything's working fine. I may run into some issues, hopefully not. We've got our bake resolution at the top because this is a bake, this can't be changed on the fly. So if I did want to bake this higher, I would need to change it and bake it higher, but luckily we can just do that at any point anyway. So let's click Bake Mesh Maps. It's just going to take a little bit of time to bake. We can already see that this is working over here. You can see that really nice bevel coming in, which is fantastic. It's softening off those edges there. You can see here it's baked on those rivets. Let's try and find those rivets now. Where are they? Here they are. Okay, so it's baked those rivets on there. If I get really close, they don't look so great. So I could maybe either increase my bake resolution, or I could look at some anti-aliasing there, or I would go back to my mesh and I would use improve my texel density so that this square takes up more of the resolution. Okay, so I'll show you what happens if we bake these at a higher resolution now. Let's bake at 4096, really high resolution bake now, but obviously this is going to be a lot bigger. So if I bake those now, I've increased the texture density, but in a very poor way. It's going to take a little bit longer to bake now, but it should give me slightly crisper bake details. It would be much better to improve the texel density in my texture rather than just flat out increase the the textile density, it's increase the document resolution itself. So you can already see that this is taking a little bit longer here, but it has worked. It's really simple, this kind of process, and it's simple because of everything I did in my last video and how I prepared everything there. Okay, when this finishes, what we'll do is we'll have a look at this bevel and how it's doing that. It's just kind of softening off there, but it has got a very sort of straight edge to it. You might get a few minor little baking errors in a few places. I'll show you a few things we can do to change those. Let's just wait for this bake to finish. Just taking 4 times as long because it's 4 times the size of the last bake that I did there. You can see here, this is the ambient occlusion. So I said that when we name things, it won't bake one thing onto the other, but this is the ambient occlusion here. We could go into our ambient occlusion settings as well and change like the spread, so how far the ambient occlusion is spreading between things. I'm not going to explain what ambient occlusion is, but you can research that online. Have a look into that if you're interested in the ambient occlusion. Okay, so it's taking quite a lot longer. There we go, baking finish. So now if I zoom in, you can see this is a lot higher quality there. Those rivets all look really nice. They've just baked on there. This bevel looks absolutely fantastic, but if we look at this from the side, you can see it obviously doesn't have a real bevel on it there. But at a distance, you would not be able to tell. That's the point of baking, the point of our high poly mesh there. It's reflecting the light in a really kind of nice way. Okay. Some things that you can do as well to improve bakes. If you get issues, you can turn average normals off. Sometimes this will give you a better bake. However, sometimes it also makes things look a bit warped, like they're kind of stretching, like the screws are going off to a different angle. But it may fix if you've got maybe a more rounded shape. It may be causing issues there, so turning that off might help there. I could then increase the search distance as well, and this might improve some of the small errors and things in some places if I didn't maybe get these quite as far. Okay, super. So in this video, we've looked at actually baking Substance, fairly quick, fairly painless, provided you've done everything in my last video correctly. Okay, thank you very much, guys.